Document. Part 4. Eris woke early the next morning, her mind buzzing with thoughts she couldn't silence. The more time she spent with Alex and Lily, the harder it became to reconcile her mission with the life they were living. Criminals or threats, they were just people trying to carve out a little happiness in an unforgiving galaxy. And yet, someone powerful enough to hire her wanted them gone. Why? What could possibly justify such cruelty? Determined to find answers, Eris decided to dig deeper into the reasons behind Alex's assassination order. She knew it was risky. Her employers monitored operatives closely, and unauthorized investigations could raise red flags, but she couldn't move forward blindly anymore, not when lives depended on it. After leaving the inn, Eris headed straight for the local library, a small brick building tucked between a bakery and a flower shop. It wasn't much to look at, but it had what she needed: public terminals connected to the Galactic network. She slipped inside quietly, avoiding eye contact with the librarian who sat behind the front desk, knitting a scarf. Finding an empty corner, she powered up one of the terminals and accessed her encrypted wrist console, using advanced decryption software embedded in her device. Eris bypassed firewalls and traced the origin of her latest assignment. Her fingers flew across the keys as lines of code scrolled across the screen. Minutes stretched into hours, but finally, she uncovered something: a trail leading to a massive corporate conglomerate known as Stellartech Industries. The name sent a chill down her spine. Stellartech was infamous for its ruthless business practices, exploiting resources and crushing competition without mercy. If they wanted Alex dead, there had to be a reason. Digging further, Eris discovered fragments of information about Alex's late wife, Claire, according to archived news articles. Claire had been a brilliant scientist working on renewable energy solutions before her sudden death in a lab accident. At the time, her research had been dismissed as impractical, but recent reports hinted that her work might hold the key to revolutionizing power. Generation across the galaxy, suddenly, everything clicked into place. Someone likely Stellartech feared that Alex might inherit his wife's knowledge or connections and use them to challenge their monopoly. Killing him would eliminate the threat entirely. As Eris pieced together the truth, anger simmered beneath her calm exterior. This wasn't justice. It was greed masked as necessity. Alex wasn't a target because he posed any real danger here. It was collateral damage in a corporate war waged by those who valued profit over humanity. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. For years, she had told herself that her targets deserved what was coming to them, that she was simply following orders. But now, faced with the stark reality of Alex's situation, she couldn't ignore the moral weight of her actions. Eris left the library feeling conflicted. I'd always prided herself on being untouchable, immune to guilt or regret. Yet here, she was questioning everything she thought she knew about herself and the world she operated in. Walking back to the inn, she replayed the events of the past few weeks in her mind: the laughter, the warmth, the sense of belonging she had found. With Alex and Lily, could she really go through with the mission now that she understood the truth? And if she didn't, what would happen to them? That evening, Eris returned to Alex's house, her resolve wavering with every step. She knocked lightly on the door, and Lily answered, her face lighting up instantly. "Hi, Eris," she chirped. Pulling her inside, "We're making dinner tonight. You want to help?" Before Eris could respond, Alex appeared in the doorway leading to the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Hey," he said warmly. "You're just in time." Eris forced a smile, though her heart felt heavy. She joined them in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and stirring pots, while Lily babbled excitedly about her day at school. Despite the tension gnawing at her insides, Eris found herself relaxing slightly. There was something comforting about the rhythm of domestic life, the way simple tasks brought people together. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to truly belong to a family like this. But the illusion shattered when Alex asked casually, "So how long are you planning to stay in Havenbrook?" The question caught Eris off guard. She faltered, nearly dropping the knife she was holding. I'm not sure yet," she stammered. "Why?" Alex shrugged, leaning against the counter. "No reason, just curious." You become part of our routine, you know. It'd be weird if you left. Yes. His words struck a nerve. Aladatis turned away, pretending to focus on the food, but her mind raced. How could she explain that staying meant putting them all in danger? That walking away might save their lives but destroy hers? She didn't have the answers, and the uncertainty was suffocating. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Iris sat with Alex on the porch, staring out at the starlit sky. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers. While neither of them spoke, content to listen to the crickets chirping in the distance. Finally, Iris broke the silence. "Alex," she began softly, "what would you do if you knew someone was coming after you?" Alex frowned, turning to look at her. "What do you mean?" Iris hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "What if someone wanted to hurt you not because of anything you did, but because of something they thought you might do someday? Would you run, fight back, or just wait for whatever happens?" Alex studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I guess it depends on why they're coming after me. If it's something I can fix, I'd try to make things right. But if it's something beyond my control," he trailed off, shaking his head, "I don't think I'd run. Running doesn't solve anything. Besides, I've got Lily to think about. I won't let anyone take her away from me." I swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. His determination only made her decision harder. She wanted to tell him everything, to warn him about the danger looming over his head, but she couldn't risk spooking him. Not yet. Instead, she nodded slowly. "You're stronger than most people give you credit for," she said quietly. "Don't forget that." The next morning, Iris packed her belongings and checked out of the inn. She told Mrs. Harper she was leaving town, thanking her for her hospitality. Then, she made her way to Alex's garage, where he was already hard at work on a new project. When he saw her approaching, he set down his tools and wiped his hands. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice tinged with disappointment. "Not forever," Iris replied, forcing a reassuring smile. "Just for a little while. I need to take care of some things." Alex nodded, though his eyes betrayed his concern. "Be careful out there, okay? The galaxy isn't always kind to wanderers." "I'll be fine," Iris promised, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. She glanced around the garage, taking in the familiar sights and sounds. "Take care of Lily and yourself." "I will," Alex said firmly. "And hey, if you ever come back this way, don't be a stranger." Iris hesitated, then reached out to squeeze his shoulder briefly. "I won't." With that, she turned and walked away, her heart heavy but her resolve firm. She couldn't protect Alex and Lily alone, not against a force as powerful as Stellar Tech. But maybe, just maybe, she could fight back in her own way. As she disappeared into the horizon, Iris vowed to uncover every secret, expose every lie, bring down whoever dared to threaten the fragile peace she had come to cherish. For the first time in years, Iris Kane had a purpose, one that went beyond survival. She wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers. End of document. Part 4. Document. Part 1. Iris Kane moved through the crowded streets of the spaceport like a shadow. No one noticed her, and that was exactly how she liked it. She wore a dark hooded cloak that hid most of her face, blending seamlessly with the throng of travelers, merchants, and mercenaries who passed by without giving her a second glance. Her boots made no sound against the metal floor, and her gloved hands rested casually at her sides. Though anyone who knew her would recognize the deadly precision in every step she took, she was not just another traveler passing through. Iris Kane was a name whispered in fear across galaxies. To some, she was a ghost, a figure of legend who appeared out of nowhere to eliminate targets with cold efficiency. To others, she was a nightmare made flesh, someone you only heard about after it was too late. Governments feared her, crime syndicates hired her, and ordinary people prayed they would never cross her path. But despite her reputation, Iris felt nothing. Killing had become as natural to her as breathing, and over time, the weight of taking lives had dulled into something mechanical, almost robotic. The mission briefing had been brief, delivered via an encrypted message on her wrist console. The target's name was Alex Carter, a human male living on Terra Prime, a small, unremarkable planet on the outer rim of the galaxy. Ali. There were no details about why he needed to be eliminated, but Eris didn't ask questions. She never did. Questions led to complications, and complications could get you killed or worse, make you feel things you weren't supposed to feel. For years, Eris had prided herself on being emotionless, detached, and untouchable. It was what made her the best at what she did. But this assignment felt different. Not because the target seemed particularly challenging, he was just a civilian, according to the intel, but because Terra Prime itself was such a strange choice. Most of her missions involved high-profile individuals or dangerous criminals, holed up in fortified strongholds. This time, however, she was being sent to a quiet little town where nothing exciting ever happened. It puzzled her, but not enough to refuse the job. Refusing wasn't an option when your employers could track your every move and erase you if you stepped out of line. As Eris boarded the shuttle bound for Terra Prime, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She hadn't always been this. Way-cold, calculating, and empty inside. Once upon a time, she'd been someone else entirely. A girl with dreams, hopes, and a family she loved more than anything. But life had a way of stripping away everything you cared about until all that was left was survival. And survive she had, rising through the ranks of the galaxy's deadliest operatives until she became untouchable. Or so she thought. The journey to Terra Prime took several hours, during which Eris reviewed the limited information she'd been given. Alex Carter was described as a single father in his mid-30s, living with his young daughter in a modest house on the outskirts of a sleepy town called Havenbrook. His occupation was listed as a mechanic. His daily routine consisted of fixing vehicles, running errands, and spending time with his child. Nothing about him screamed dangerous or worth killing, yet here she was, en route to end his life. When the shuttle landed, Eris disembarked and immediately began scanning her surroundings. Terra Prime was unlike any planet she'd visited before. Skies were a soft shade of lavender, and the air carried the faint scent of wildflowers. Rolling hills stretched out as far as the eye could see. That's it! With clusters of simple homes and fields of golden crops swaying gently in the breeze. It was picturesque, almost serene, and completely foreign to Eris. She had spent most of her life navigating sprawling megacities, asteroid colonies, and war-torn battlefields. This place felt ... wrong. Havenbrook itself was even smaller than she'd imagined. The main street was lined with quaint shops and cafes, their windows adorned with colorful flowers and hand-painted signs. Children played in the park nearby, laughing and chasing each other while parents watched from benches. Eris couldn't help but notice how everyone seemed to know one another. People greeted each other warmly, exchanging pleasantries and sharing stories. It was a stark contrast to the anonymity she was used to, and it made her uncomfortable. She checked into a small inn near the edge of town, paying in cash to avoid leaving a digital trail. The innkeeper, a kindly older woman named Mrs. Harper, welcomed her with a warm smile and offered to show her around if she needed anything. Eris politely declined, preferring to keep to herself. After settling into her room, she unpacked her gear, a sleek black suit designed for stealth, various weapons concealed in hidden compartments, and a set of advanced surveillance tools. Everything she needed to complete the mission quickly and cleanly. That evening, Eris ventured out to gather more information. She stopped at a local diner, choosing a seat in the corner where she could observe without drawing attention. The diner was cozy with checkered floors, vintage posters on the walls, and the comforting aroma of freshly baked pie wafting through the air. A waitress approached her table, jotting down her order with a friendly smile. Eris ordered coffee, mostly to have something to do with her hands while she listened to the conversations around her. It didn't take long for her to pick up on the topic of discussion. Alex Carter. Several patrons mentioned him by name, praising his work ethic and kindness. One man recounted how Alex had stayed late at his garage to fix a broken engine, refusing payment because the customer was short on credits. Another woman gushed about how patient he was with her son, teaching him the basics of mechanics during summer break. Eris listened intently, filing away each detail while sipping her coffee. None of it added up. If Alex was truly a threat to anyone, it certainly wasn't obvious from these accounts. Just as Eris was about to leave, the door opened, and a man walked in. He was tall and lean, with tousled brown hair and a scruffy beard. He wore a faded jacket over a plain t-shirt and jeans, looking every bit the part of a small-town mechanic. Eris recognized him instantly. It was Alex Carter. He nodded too. Few people as he made his way to the counter, ordering a sandwich to go. His demeanor was relaxed, almost carefree, and there was a genuine warmth in the way he interacted with those around him, for reasons she couldn't explain. Eris found herself watching him closely. There was nothing remarkable about his appearance or behavior, yet something about him intrigued her. Maybe it was the ease with which he navigated the room as if he belonged there, or maybe it was the subtle flicker of sadness in his eyes, hinting at a deeper story beneath the surface. Whatever it was, it gnawed at her, stirring emotions she hadn't felt in years. Alex left the diner shortly afterward, carrying his food in a paper bag. Eris followed him discreetly, keeping a safe distance as he strolled down the street. Eventually turned onto a quieter road leading out of town, where houses grew fewer and farther apart. Eris hung back, memorizing the route and noting the layout of his property. The house was modest, but well-maintained, with flower beds lining the front yard and a swing set in the backyard. Through the window, she could see a young girl sitting at the kitchen table, coloring in a book while Alex unpacked groceries. Eris lingered for a moment longer, observing the scene before retreating into the shadows. Something about Alex and his daughter unsettled her, though she couldn't put her finger on why. They seemed happy, content, and utterly ordinary. And yet, here she was, planning to tear that happiness apart. The thought lingered in her mind as she returned to the inn, gnawing at her conscience in ways she hadn't anticipated. That night, as Eris lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, she realized this mission might not be as straightforward as she'd assumed. For the first time in years, doubt crept into her thoughts, whispering questions she wasn't ready to answer. Who was Alex Carter really? Why did he need to die? More importantly, could she bring herself to pull the trigger? Asterisk, asterisk, end of document. Part 1, asterisk, asterisk. Document. Part 2, the next morning. Eris woke before dawn. She had always been an early riser, a habit born out of necessity rather than preference. In her line of work, the hours before sunrise were often the safest time to move unseen. Today she wasn't in a hurry. Instead, she sat by the window of her room, staring out at the quiet town bathed in soft gray light. Havenbrook looked peaceful, almost dreamlike, as if it existed in a world untouched by violence or corruption. It was unsettling, not because it felt fake, because it felt real, too real for someone like her. Eris pushed the thought aside and focused on the task at hand. She dressed in plain clothes to avoid drawing attention and slipped out of the and just as the first rays of sunlight began to creep over the horizon, her plan was simple: spend the day observing Alex Carter, learning his routines, and identifying vulnerabilities. The more she knew about him, the easier it would be to complete the mission. Yet, as she walked toward his house, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something about this job was off. When she arrived, Alex was already outside, tinkering with an old hoverbike in his driveway. He wore grease-stained coveralls and a pair of gloves, humming softly to himself as he worked. His daughter, Lily, played nearby, building what appeared to be a fortress out of cardboard boxes. She giggled every time one of the walls collapsed, only to rebuild it with renewed determination. Watching them together, Eris felt a strange pang in her chest, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't pity or guilt. It was something softer, almost nostalgic. She lingered for a while, hidden behind a row of trees lining the edge of the property. From her vantage point, she could see everything clearly. Alex paused occasionally to check on Lily, ruffling her hair, or offering words of encouragement when she grew frustrated. Their interactions were effortless, filled with laughter and affection. Eris found herself wondering what it must be like to live like that, to belong to someone so completely that even the smallest moments carried weight. By mid-morning, Alex finished repairing the hover bike, and called Lily over to test it out. The little girl clapped excitedly as he revved the engine, then climbed onto the seat with his help. Together, they zoomed around the yard, leaving trails of dust in their wake. Eris watched silently, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. Despite her training, she couldn't ignore the warmth radiating from the scene before her. It reminded her of fragments of memories she'd long since buried, memories of a childhood spent playing under the stars, of family dinners where stories were shared and laughter echoed through the house. As the day wore on, Alex and Lily retreated indoors. Eris debated whether to follow them, but decided against it. Breaking into someone's home felt too intrusive, even for her. Instead, she wandered back into town, blending into the growing crowd of residents, beginning their daily routines. Stopped at a bakery to buy a loaf of bread, partly to maintain her cover and partly because she hadn't eaten since the night before. The shopkeeper greeted her warmly, asking if she was new in town. Eris nodded, keeping her answers vague but polite. Small talk wasn't her strong suit, but she managed well enough to avoid suspicion. Later that afternoon, Eris returned to the diner where she'd seen Alex the previous evening. She chose the same corner seat, ordering another cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie. The place was busier now, filled with locals chatting animatedly about everything from crop yields to upcoming festivals. Eris listened intently, picking up bits of conversation that painted a clearer picture of Alex's life. People spoke highly of him, praising not only his skills as a mechanic, but also his generosity and kindness. One woman recounted how he had helped her fix her car late at night after it broke down on the highway, refusing payment despite her insistence. Another man joked about how Alex always seemed to have time for everyone, even when he barely had any for himself. Despite the glowing remarks, Eris noticed a recurring theme in the stories: loneliness. Beneath the surface of Alex's cheerful demeanor, there was an undercurrent of sadness that people recognized but rarely addressed. Some speculated it stemmed from the loss of his wife, though no one seemed to know the full story. Eris filed the information away, adding it to the growing list of details she didn't fully understand. Loneliness was something she understood all too well, but hearing others speak of it so openly made her uncomfortable as the sun dipped below the horizon. Casting the diner in shades of orange and pink, Alex walked in again. This time, he brought Lily with him. The little girl clung to his hand, her wide eyes scanning the room with curiosity. They took a seat near the counter and Alex ordered burgers for both of them. Lily chattered excitedly about her day, recounting the adventures she'd had with the cardboard fort and the hoverbike. Alex listened attentively, nodding and smiling as she spoke. Occasionally, he interjected with a comment or question, prompting another round of enthusiastic storytelling. Eris observed them from across the room, her expression unreadable. She had never been particularly good with children. They were unpredictable, emotional, and often difficult to read. Yet there was something disarmingly genuine about Lily. Her joy was infectious, her trust unshakable. Even from a distance, Eris could see how much love Alex poured into raising her. It was evident in the way he leaned closer when she spoke, in the gentle tone of his voice, in the pride shining in his eyes whenever she accomplished something. After finishing their meal, Alex and Lily prepared to leave. As they passed Eris's table, Lily suddenly stopped, tugging on her father's sleeve. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing directly at Eris. Alex glanced over, meeting her gaze briefly before offering a polite smile. "Just someone passing through," he said softly, steering Lily toward the door. But the moment stayed with Eris, lingering in her mind long after they were gone. That night, back in her room at the inn, Eris replayed the events of the day in her head. She had gathered plenty of useful information: Alex's habits, his relationships, his vulnerabilities, but none of it brought her closer to understanding why he was marked for death. More troubling still was the growing unease she felt about carrying out the mission. For years she had prided herself on being able to separate emotion from action, to view targets as nothing more than obstacles to be removed. But Alex wasn't an obstacle. He was a persona, good person, by all accounts, and killing him would mean destroying something beautiful. Eris paced the length of her room, trying to silence the doubts creeping into her mind. Reminded herself of the rules she lived by. Don't ask questions, don't get involved, and above all, don't hesitate. Hesitation got people killed. Not just targets, but operatives like her who couldn't afford to second-guess themselves. And yet, as she stood there in the dim light of her room, she realized she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. This mission wasn't sitting right with her, and deep down, she knew it never would. For the first time in years, Eris allowed herself to consider the possibility of walking away. Not just from this assignment, but from the life she had built one, defined by violence, secrecy, and isolation. And could she really do it? Could she leave behind the only identity she had ever known and start over? The idea terrified her. But it also sparked a flicker of hope she hadn't dared to feel in a very long time. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Eris resolved to keep watching, to learn more about Alex and the forces that wanted him dead. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. This mission would change her. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen. End of document, Part 2. Document Part 3. The next day, Eris decided to take a different approach. Instead of lurking in the shadows, she chose to step into the light just a little. She couldn't shake the feeling that Alex and Lily were more than just names on a dossier. They were people with lives, dreams, and struggles, and she wanted to understand them better before making any decisions. It was risky, she knew, but something deep inside her insisted it was necessary. Eris began by visiting Alex's garage. It's a modest building tucked away on the outskirts of town. The sign above the door read Carter Repairs, painted in bold letters that had faded slightly over time. Inside, the air smelled of oil and metal, and tools hung neatly on pegboards lining the walls. Alex was bent over an engine, his hands moving with practiced ease as he worked. He glanced up when the bell above the door jingled, signaling Eris's arrival. "Can I help you?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. His voice was friendly, curious, but not overly so. He wasn't the type to pry, which only made Eris more intrigued. "I'm looking for some work done on my gear," she said, holding up a small device she carried with her, piece of equipment she rarely used, but could pass off as needing. "Repairs. Someone told me you're the best around." Alex smiled faintly, though there was a hint of skepticism in his eyes. "Well, I try my best. Let me take a look." He gestured for her to follow him to a nearby workbench. As he examined the device, Eris took the opportunity to study him up close. Up until now, she had only observed him from afar, but being this near allowed her to notice details she had missed before. There were fine lines around his eyes, suggesting years of smiling through hardship. His hands, though calloused and stained with grease, moved with a gentleness that spoke of care and patience. And then there was the way he carried himself, not arrogantly, but with quiet confidence, as if he knew exactly who he was and didn't need anyone else's approval. "So, are you passing through or sticking around for a while?" Alex asked casually, breaking the silence. Eris hesitated. Yes. She hadn't expected him to ask questions, let alone ones that required real answers. "Just passing through," she replied evenly. "But I might stay longer if things go well here." Alex nodded, seemingly satisfied with her response. "Havenbrook's a nice place. Quiet, but nice. You'll fit right in." There was no judgment in his tone, no suspicion, only genuine warmth. It caught Eris off guard. Most people she encountered either feared her or distrusted her outright. Alex, however, treated her like any other customer, like someone worth knowing. For a moment, she almost forgot why she was there. As Alex continued working on the device, Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching a stuffed animal in one hand and a coloring book in the other. Her bright eyes lit up when she saw Eris. "Hi," she exclaimed, waving enthusiastically. "Hey, kiddo," Alex said, glancing over his shoulder. "What are you doing out of the house?" "I got bored," Lily admitted, with a sheepish grin. Then, turning back to Eris, she added, "Do you want to see my drawings? I made them yesterday." Before Eris could respond, Alex chuckled softly. "Don't pester our guest, Lil. She's probably busy." "It's okay," Eris said quickly, surprising even herself. "I'd love to see them, if that's all right with you," Lily beamed, clearly delighted by the attention, and bounded over to show Eris her artwork. The pages were filled with colorful scribbles and imaginative scenes, spaceships soaring through starry skies, animals wearing hats, and families holding hands under rainbow-colored suns. Each drawing was unique, bursting with creativity and joy. Eris flipped through them slowly, marveling at how much emotion the little girl managed to convey with such simple tools. "These are really good," Eris said sincerely, handing the book back to Lily. "You've got talent." "Thanks," Lily replied, hugging her stuffed animal tightly. "Maybe someday I'll make pictures for everyone in the whole galaxy." Alex laughed, shaking his head. "One step at a time, champ. First, we'll start with Havenbrook." Exchange felt natural, easy, as if they had known each other for years rather than minutes. Yet beneath the surface, Eris's mind raced. She had always prided herself on maintaining distance, on keeping her true self hidden behind layers of deception. But here she was, sitting in a mechanic's shop, bonding with a child, and exchanging pleasantries with a man she was supposed to kill. What was happening to her? By the time Alex finished repairing her device, Eris found herself reluctant to leave. Still, she knew she couldn't linger too long without raising suspicion. "Thanks for fixing this," she said, tucking the gadget into her pocket. "You are right, it works perfectly now." "No problem," Alex replied with a nod. "If you need anything else, don't hesitate to stop by." "I will," Eris promised, though she wasn't sure whether she meant it or not. Over the next few days, Eris made a point of visiting Alex and Lily regularly. Sometimes she brought items to be repaired. Other times, she simply stopped by to chat. Gradually, she became a familiar face in their lives, someone they greeted with smiles and open arms. It was dangerous, she knew, to let her guard down like this. Every interaction brought her closer to them, making it harder to remember why. She was there in the first place. One afternoon, Eris sat on the porch of Alex's house watching Lily chase butterflies in the yard. Alex joined her, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. "You seem different from most travelers," he remarked, handing her a glass. "Most people don't stick around Havenbrook for long." Eris shrugged, sipping the cool drink. "Maybe I'm tired of moving, or maybe you're looking for something," Alex suggested gently. "Sometimes we don't even know what it is until we find it." His words struck a chord within her. Was that what she was doing here? Searching for something she couldn't name? But the thought lingered, refusing to fade. As the days turned into weeks, Eris found herself drawn deeper into their world. She helped Alex with odd jobs around the garage, played board games with Lily, and even attended a community barbecue where everyone welcomed her as if she belonged. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of belonging not as an assassin, but as a person. It was intoxicating, terrifying, and utterly foreign. Yet despite the growing bond between them, Eris couldn't ignore the looming threat hanging over Alex's head. Whoever had ordered his assassination was still out there, waiting for results. Sooner or later, they would grow impatient and send someone else to finish the job. The thought weighed heavily on her, gnawing at her conscience with every passing day. One evening, as the 3 of them sat together under a blanket of stars, Eris finally voiced the question that had been haunting her. "Alex," she began hesitantly, "has anyone ever tried to hurt you or your family?" Alex frowned, clearly caught off guard by the question. "Not that I know of. Why do you ask?" Eris hesitated, torn between revealing too much and saying nothing at all. Just ... Be careful, okay? "People aren't always what they seem." Alex studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I appreciate the concern, but we're pretty safe here." Havenbrook looks out for its own. Eris wanted to believe him, but she knew better. Safe places didn't exist, not for people like her, and not for people like Alex either. Danger had a way of finding those who least expected it, and she feared it was only a matter of time before it arrived on their doorstep. As she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of her room at the inn, Eris realized she had reached a crossroads. She could walk away, leaving Alex and Lily to fend for themselves against forces they couldn't possibly understand. Or she could stay and protect them, risking everything she had worked for in the process. Either choice came with consequences. But one thing was certain. Her old life, the life of shadows and secrets, was slipping further and further out of reach. For the first time in years, Eris Kane let herself hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find redemption in the unlikeliest of places. End of document, Part 3. Document. Part 5. Eris didn't go far. She could not when Alex and Lily were still in danger. Instead, she rented a small cabin on the edge of Havenbrook, far enough from town to avoid drawing attention, but close enough to keep an eye on them. The cabin was simple, with bare wooden walls, a creaky floor, and a single window that overlooked the fields stretching out toward the horizon. It wasn't luxurious, but it served its purpose, a safe place to plan her next move. For days, Eris worked tirelessly, using every skill she had honed over the years to gather information about Stellar Tech Industries. She hacked into secure networks, intercepted encrypted communications, and pieced together fragments of data until a clearer picture emerged. What she discovered made her blood boil. Stellar Tech wasn't just targeting Alex. They were systematically silencing anyone connected to Claire's research. Scientists, engineers, even low-level lab assistants had been bought off, intimidated, or eliminated. The corporation's reach was vast, its influence pervasive, and its methods ruthless. But Eris wasn't afraid. In fact, the more she learned, the angrier she became. Anger was something she understood. It fueled her, sharpened her focus, and gave her the strength to push forward when doubt threatened to pull her under. For the first time in years, she felt alive, as if the weight of her past crimes might finally serve a greater purpose. Her plan began to take shape slowly. She knew she couldn't take on Stellar Tech alone, not directly. They were too powerful, too well-connected. But there was one thing corporations like Stellar Tech feared above all else: exposure. If she could gather irrefutable evidence of their crimes and broadcast it across the galaxy, she could turn public opinion against them. It wouldn't destroy them outright, but it would weaken their grip and give Alex and others like him a fighting chance. The challenge lay in obtaining the evidence. Stellar Tech's operations were shrouded in secrecy, protected by layers of security protocols and private mercenaries. Breaking through those defenses would require precision, timing, and a level of risk Eris hadn't faced in years.
But she
Was willing to do whatever it took. This wasn't just about saving Alex anymore. It was about proving to herself that she could be more than a weapon, more than a ghost haunting the shadows of the galaxy. One afternoon, as Eris pored over maps and schematics in her cabin, there was a knock at the door. She froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the blaster holstered at her side. No one knew where she was staying. No one except Alex. Slipping silently to the door, she peered through the gap between the frame and the wall. Standing outside was Lily, clutching a basket filled with freshly baked cookies. "Hi, Eris." Lily chirped brightly when Eris opened the door. "Dad said you might be busy, but I wanted to bring you these anyway. You've been helping us so much." Eris blinked. Caught off guard by the unexpected visit, she glanced around nervously, scanning the area for signs of anyone watching. When she saw no one, she stepped aside and gestured for Lily to come in. "Thank you," she said softly, accepting the basket. "They look delicious." Lily beamed. Clearly pleased with herself, she wandered around the cabin, examining the sparse furnishings and peering curiously at the scattered papers on the table. "What are you doing?" she asked, pointing to the maps. Eris hesitated, unsure how to respond. She couldn't exactly tell a child about corporate conspiracies and assassination plots. "Just working on something important," she replied vaguely. "Can I help?" Lily offered eagerly, pulling up a chair and climbing onto it. "Really good at finding things." Despite herself, Eris smiled. There was something endearing about the little girl's enthusiasm. "All right," she said, pushing a stack of documents toward her. "See if you can spot anything interesting." Lily leaned forward, her brow furrowed in concentration as she scanned the pages. Of course, she didn't understand what she was looking at, but her presence brought a strange sense of comfort to the otherwise tense atmosphere. Eris found herself explaining bits and pieces of her work in simpler terms, using metaphors and analogies that even a child could grasp. To her surprise, Lily listened intently, asking questions that sometimes revealed angles Eris hadn't considered. By the time Lily left, carrying an empty cookie basket and a promise to visit again soon, Eris realized she hadn't thought about the mission's dangers for hours. It was a fleeting reprieve, but it reminded her why she was doing this, not just for Alex, but for Lily too. For the future she represented. A future free from fear and oppression. Over the next few weeks, Eris continued her preparations, alternating between gathering intel and testing potential strategies. She reached out to old contacts, people who owed her favors or shared her disdain for corporate greed. Some agreed to help, providing resources or insider information. Others refused, warning her that taking on stellar tech was suicide. Eris listened politely, thanked them for their advice, and moved on. She didn't need allies to believe in her cause. She only needed them to act when the time came. Meanwhile, she maintained a careful balance with Alex and Lily, visiting often. Enough to avoid suspicion, but not so frequently that it raised questions. Her interactions with them grew increasingly bittersweet. Every laugh, every shared meal, every quiet moment felt precious, fragile as if it might shatter at any moment. And yet Eris clung to those moments, storing them away like treasures, to sustain her through the battles ahead. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Alex turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "You've changed since you got here," he said quietly. "Not in a bad way, just different. Like you're carrying less weight than before." Eris tensed slightly, unsure how to respond. Was she that transparent? Had he noticed the cracks forming in her carefully constructed facade? She forced a smile, brushing off his observation with a shrug. "Maybe I'm just getting used to Havenbrook." Alex chuckled softly, though his eyes remained serious. "Or maybe you're finally letting yourself breathe?" His words lingered in her mind long after the sun had disappeared below the horizon. Letting herself breathe, that was exactly what she was trying to do. For so long, she had buried her emotions, suppressed her humanity, and convinced herself that survival was the only thing that mattered. But now, surrounded by people who cared about her, she was beginning to see that life wasn't just about existing. It was about connecting, growing, fighting for something worth living for. As the days passed, Eris finalized her plan. She identified a key facility owned by Stellar Tech, a data hub located on a remote moon where sensitive records were stored. If she could infiltrate the facility and retrieve the files, she could expose the corporation's crimes to the entire galaxy. It was a risky operation, requiring stealth, speed, and flawless execution. One misstep, and she'd be dead or worse, captured. The night before her departure, Eris paid one last visit to Alex's house. She knocked lightly on the door, and when Alex answered, she stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Lily was already asleep upstairs, leaving the two of them alone in the quiet living room. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Eris announced bluntly, cutting straight to the point. "There's something I need to do." Alex frowned, concern flickering across his face. "What kind of something?" "It's complicated," Eris admitted, avoiding his gaze. "But it's important, and it's dangerous." Alex studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're not telling me everything, are you?" "No," Eris confessed, "but trust me, it's better this way." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but I want you to promise me one thing. Come back safe, okay? Lily and I. We care. About you." His words hit Eris like a punch to the chest. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears she hadn't expected to feel. "I'll do my best," she promised hoarsely. Before she could second-guess herself, she pulled Alex into a tight hug. He stiffened in surprise, then relaxed, wrapping his arms around her in return. For a brief moment, Eris allowed herself to let go to feel the warmth of human connection, the comfort of knowing she wasn't alone. Then, reluctantly, she stepped back, forcing herself to focus. "Take care of each other." "Right," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm raging. inside her, and don't trust anyone who comes asking questions about me. With that, she turned and walked out the door, disappearing into the night. As she made her way back to the cabin, she repeated Alex's words in her head. Come back safe. She didn't know if she could keep that promise, but she vowed to try for him, for Lily, for the hope of a brighter future. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. End of document, Part 5. Document. Part 6. The journey to the remote moon where Stellartech's data hub was located took nearly 2 days. Eris traveled aboard a stolen transport ship, its engines humming softly as it cut through the cold void of space. She had chosen the vessel carefully. It was old and unremarkable, blending seamlessly with the countless other freighters drifting between planets. No one would suspect that inside this battered hunk of metal sat one of the galaxy's deadliest operatives. Preparing for what might be her most dangerous mission yet, Eris spent the trip reviewing her plan, going over every detail again and again until she could recite it in her sleep. She knew the layout of the facility by heart, thanks to schematics she had painstakingly pieced together from intercepted communications. The data hub was heavily guarded, protected by layers of security systems and armed patrols. But none of that worried her. Breaking into places like this was second nature to someone with her skills. What kept her awake at night wasn't the danger, it was the stakes. If she failed, Alex and Lily wouldn't just lose their lives, they'd lose their chance at a future free from fear. When the moon finally came into view, Eris felt a surge of determination. It was a barren, lifeless rock orbiting a distant gas giant, its surface pockmarked with craters and shrouded in perpetual twilight. The data hub itself was nestled deep within the moon's crust, hidden beneath layers of reinforced steel and concrete. Above, it looked like nothing more than a cluster of antennas poking out of the ground. To anyone else it might have seemed insignificant, but Eris knew better. She landed the transport ship in a secluded valley several kilometers away from the facility, cloaking it with technology designed to mask its presence from scanners. Then, donning her sleek black suit and arming herself with an array of gadgets and weapons, she set out on foot. The terrain was harsh, rocky, and uneven, with sharp winds whipping across the landscape, but Eris moved with practiced ease, her boots barely making a sound against the rough ground as she approached the facility. Eris activated her wrist console, which displayed a live feed of the surrounding area. Motion sensors detected no immediate threats, but she stayed low, using the natural cover provided by jagged boulders and shadowy crevices. When she reached the outer perimeter, she paused, studying the entrance carefully. 2 guards stood watch near the main gate, their rifles slung casually over their shoulders. They chatted idly, oblivious to the predator lurking just beyond their line of sight. Eris didn't waste time. With fluid precision, she darted forward, closing the distance between them in seconds. Before either guard could react, she struck one. Swift blow to the neck rendered the first unconscious, while a well-placed kick sent the second sprawling to the ground. A quick injection of sedative ensured neither man would wake anytime soon. She dragged their bodies into the shadows, hiding them from view before slipping through the gate. Inside, the facility was eerily quiet. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows along narrow corridors lined with doors marked with cryptic symbols. Eris moved silently, her senses on high alert. Every step echoed faintly against the walls, a reminder of how exposed she was. She navigated the labyrinthine structure with ease, following the map etched into her mind. Her destination lay deep within the complex and secure server room where Stellartech stored its most sensitive documents. Reaching the server room proved easier than expected. The guards stationed outside were distracted, engrossed in a game of cards instead of monitoring the hallway. Eris dispatched them quickly, disabling surveillance cameras and bypassing electronic locks with tools she carried in her belt. Within minutes, she was inside, standing before rows of blinking servers humming with energy. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she hacked into the system, decrypting files and downloading everything she could find. Names, dates, locations. It was all there, a damning record of Stellartech's crimes. Blackmail schemes, illegal experiments, assassinations, ordered the evidence, painted a picture of corruption so vast it made her stomach churn. As the download progressed, Eris couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction. This was the weapon she needed to bring them down. But just as the final file transferred to her portable drive, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in an ominous glow. Someone must have noticed the breach. Eris cursed under her breath, pocketing the drive and sprinting toward the exit. She had anticipated resistance, but not this quickly. Time was running. Out, guards flooded the corridors, their shouts echoing as they scrambled to contain the intruder. Eris weaved through them with deadly efficiency, using every trick in her arsenal to evade capture. Smoke bombs created diversions, EMP grenades disabled automated turrets. And her combat training allowed her to take down multiple opponents without slowing down. Still, the odds were against her. Reinforcements poured in from every direction. Forcing her deeper into the facility, cornered in a maintenance tunnel, Eris paused to catch her breath. Her suit was torn in places, her body aching from exertion, but she refused to give up. Not now, not when she was so close. Peering around the corner, she spotted a ventilation shaft leading upward. It was narrow and rusted, but it offered a way out. Without hesitation, she climbed inside, pulling herself hand over hand through the cramped passage. The shaft led to a service hatch near the surface. Kicking it open, Eris emerged into the frigid air of the moon, gasping for breath. Behind her, the facility buzzed with activity as alarms continued to wail. She didn't look back. Instead, she sprinted toward the valley where she had hidden. The transport ship, her legs burning with effort. Each step brought her closer to Freedoman, to the people waiting for her back on Terra Prime. By the time she reached the ship, sweat mingled with dirt streaked across her face and her chest. Heaved with exhaustion, she wasted no time climbing aboard and firing up the engines. As the vessel lifted off, she glanced at the data drive clutched tightly in her hand. It contained everything she needed to expose stellar tech, but getting it out into the open would require careful timing and strategy. For now, though, she allowed herself a small measure of relief. She had survived. Back on Terra Prime, Alex and Lily waited anxiously for news of Eris's return. Days turned into a week, and still there was no sign of her. Alex tried to stay optimistic, telling himself she was fine, that she always came through in the end. But doubt gnawed at him, whispering fears he couldn't ignore. What if something had gone wrong? What if she hadn't made it? Lily, too, missed Eris deeply. She often asked when her cookie friend would visit again, her voice tinged with worry. Alex did his best to reassure her, inventing stories about how Eris was busy helping others or exploring new places. Yet late at night, when Lily was asleep and the house was silent, Alex found himself staring at the stars, wondering if she was looking at them too. Then, one evening, as Alex worked in the garage, there was a knock at the door. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. Slowly, he set down his tools and walked to the entrance, bracing himself for whatever or whoever might be waiting outside. When he opened the door, he saw her standing there, battered but alive. Eris, he breathed, relief crashing over him like a wave. "You're back," she nodded, stepping inside. Her clothes were torn, her face smudged with grime, but her eyes burned with intensity. "I got what I needed," she said simply, holding up the data drive. "Now we can fight back." Alex stared at her, awe and gratitude mixing with a newfound respect. "What happens next?" "We expose them," Eris replied firmly. "To the whole galaxy. We make sure they can never hurt anyone again." For the first time in weeks, Alex felt hope not just for himself and Lily, but for everyone living under the shadow of greed and oppression. Together they would shine a light into the darkness. And maybe, just maybe, they could change the galaxy for the better. End of document. Part 6.